people, sexually abusing young people. That is very hard for a lot of people to believe or metabolize, but it feels like that's not totally crazy. Like that happens. Does that happen?
I mean, absolutely. It's so dark that it's hard for average people, regular people that are just trying to live their lives to even approach it. And even imagine, like, you cannot put yourselves in the shoes of someone so depraved. And honestly, like, regular Americans can't even put themselves in the shoes of a millionaire, let alone a billionaire, because like they're just trying to pay their bills and they can't, because the billionaires are, these billionaires at least are doing certain things that are messing everything up. But so it's so far removed from our regular experience that it's hard to understand and believe. But it is, I mean, there's been good evidence of elements of that in various kind of fringe investigations for a long time. And I don't say fringe to mean they're unreliable. I mean fringe to say that they just never get traction with the mainstream media for whatever reason.
Right.
But it's right there in these emails and in these files. And it's not entirely clear what all of it means, but there's very overt references, there's covert references, and there's just mounting, because people are still digging through them. These are millions of files and no effective way to sort through them the way that the DOJ put them out. And so the evidence is mounting more and more that we have everything in these files from people that were turning a blind eye, which is also reprehensible, people that were adjacent and complicit, people that were directly complicit, people that were straight up evil and disgusting, and then people that venture into the demonic or the truly depraved. And people that have been following this story have known for a long time that unfortunately that is that's always been a part of it, and we've had evidence that that's a part of it for a long time. And that's true of most all human trafficking networks. The people that are doing human trafficking by their nature are some of the most depraved people on this planet, and it's an enormous industry, and it's not getting any smaller. And it's tragic that it takes something so overt as, this massive blackmail ring apparently blowing up in the middle of the United States government and across the entire world, and then trailing out in a 10-year long cover-up, almost 7-year long cover-up, for people to even confront that this is happening. But it's definitely happening. Not everyone in the files is, participating in ritualistic sacrifices or anything like that. Right. And there are fake things in the files that are, for whatever reason in there. Like, for one example, one that went very viral is there's an image in the files of a cutting board with chickens on it and a black box censored out, but there's a foot sticking out, and it's obviously a baby's foot. And the implication is that it's a cutting board with some chickens and a baby, and they're going to carve it up and eat it. By my understanding, that is a fake image. It's kind of hard to tell what's real and what's fake at this point, but there's stuff like that in there that's so there's just a lot of really messed up stuff in there, but there's also a lot of people running away with a little tidbit for views or clicks or likes or whatever it is. And so it's really important that people pump the brakes, slow down, and go to the original source files and look for people that are citing their sources on the files that they're referencing. And when they make definitive claims, they show you the files that they're talking about, because a lot of people are making claims that are actually objectively untrue or are based on a small morsel that has been blown up into a whole meal of great content, but not necessarily great journalism.
So most people don't wake up in the morning and decide to feel horrible, exhausted, foggy, disconnected from the... I would also say that Jeffrey Epstein describes Bill Barr, the former AG, as, quote, CIA. Jeffrey Epstein privately says this guy's CIA. Bill Barr covered up Epstein's murder. He was clearly murdered in federal detention. Barr said out loud, we got to make sure everyone thinks this is a suicide. So why isn't he being asked about this? And the second is Mike Pompeo. And Mike Pompeo was caught plotting to murder Julian Assange, the head of WikiLeaks. Why is this significant? Well, because it was WikiLeaks that made that first tranche of emails available to the public. And it was Julian Assange who said on camera, basically said, my source, he didn't say this he didn't say my source, but he heavily suggested in an interview with Dutch television, my source was Seth Rich, the DNC staffer who was found murdered on the street in Washington in a so-called robbery where nothing was taken from him. That investigation was taken over by the FBI. What? Why? And Assange goes on Dutch television and says, I can't see who my sources are, but they face great risks. You can pull up the interview right now and look at it. And then he points to Seth Rich. And the interviewer's like, wait, are you saying Seth Rich was murdered for this? And Assange is like, look, I can't tell you who my sources are, but my sources take great risks. Seth Rich just got murdered. I mean, that couldn't be clearer, right? It was right after that Julian Assange was incarcerated, first in an embassy in London and then in Belmarsh prison, never charged with a crime. And that was pushed by CIA and Mike Pompeo. And it's like, wait a second. Shouldn't someone ask Mike Pompeo? Like, what is this? What is this? These are real allegations. They're credible allegations. And rather than follow up, you're punishing the guy who brought them to light. Tell us how that works, Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo's like wandering free and no one asks him about this. Like, what is going on, Ian Carroll?
Every time I talk about this story, every aspect of the story from Pizzagate to Epstein, everything in between, I always have to try not to get angry because it's when you think about, especially for me, the cover up, it makes me so furious how regular Americans are going to jail over like smoking a joint or going to jail over like paying taxes that are getting sent overseas anyways, or going to jail over a parking ticket they can't afford, whatever it is, this madness in this country where we are lawfared to death. But these obvious criminals and these people that we at least have obvious questions for are just walking free. And you bring up two really great points that, I mean, in both cases, I think it's obvious that those actions are being taken on behalf of whatever criminal organizations or happenings are being exposed. For example, in those email dumps that Seth Rich probably leaked, because it wasn't just Pizzagate stuff. It was also all sorts of Benghazi stuff, all sorts of Hillary Clinton stuff, all sorts of other really serious stuff that also was never asked of the appropriate parties. But I mean, when you start talking about who's still walking free that we should be asking questions of, and we're looking at the Epstein investigation, that list immediately grows to like 100 miles long. And we got in one of the document drops that happened a couple weeks ago, and then we re-corroborated it multiple times since then. We got a list of 10 co-conspirators that they have had for years from one of their old investigations that just never happened because Kash Patel has been telling us there are no co-conspirators. There is no organization. It was just him alone. But we've got a document saying that they had 10 co-conspirators, one of whom was Leslie Wexner. They're named. And that the list is long. Like there's pilots. We know their names. Larry Visosky. There's 3 different pilots. There's a bunch of other madams like Ghislaine Maxwell, but assistants that were helping to recruit girls. There's a bunch of other people that were trafficking models and bringing models in and out. There's just this there's an enormously long list of people in various roles all around Epstein that we know full well were at the very least deeply suspiciously involved, where they should be asked some very serious questions. I mean, right up to Ehud Barak, who by my accounting looks like the handler of Epstein. He certainly looks like we have all these emails from both Ehud Barak's email server now and from Jeffrey Epstein's trove of documents that corroborate them doing what looks like intelligence operations all around the world and in the United States. So there's just an endless number of people that, like you were saying earlier, that we could at least investigate because it's in the name, the Federal Bureau of Investigation.